Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Tuesday morning, talking 6 games around the NBA. Before we hop into the slate, your quick reminder, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below. That way you get notified whenever I post a brand new video. Also, if you're not already following me on Twitter or taking advantage of my daily content and projections, my Twitter handle and Patreon page are in the description down below. You can head over there and take a look at the monthly options that I have available, or you can send me a direct message on Twitter and I can get you set up for 50% off your season-long price. Covers you all the way through the playoffs this season. But without further ado, let's hop into the games. The first game that we're going to talk about tonight, Phoenix at Indiana. And a game that I do have a little bit of interest in. Interesting to note the line. Indiana 10.5 point favorites actually opened as 12.5 point favorites, so something we definitely want to keep an eye on here. A 219.5 over under Miles Turner, Darren Collison, and Corey Joseph all questionable for this game. Devin Booker is expected to play here tonight, and I have interest in Devin Booker. Devin Booker coming in at 8,400 on DraftKings, 8,500 on FanDuel. Pretty strong tournament option in this spot tonight. Team high 31% usage rate, really high assist rate. Pacers have been getting lit up from three-pointers of late. They're giving up 41% on above the break threes. Booker, 32% of his shots are above the break threes, so there's a little bit of a boost there for him. And then also you have the assist upside here for him as well. I really like him. Had a really strong outing against Indiana last time out, 36 minutes, 42 fantasy points, shot 7 of 21 from the floor. Obviously, you do expect him to shoot a little bit better than that, so I do have interest in him in tournaments. TJ Warren, I think the guy that I have the most interest in here tonight. TJ Warren comes in at 6,200 on DraftKings, 6K over on FanDuel, so a little bit of a better play over on FanDuel, but Indiana really struggling against opposing power forwards recently. They ranked 25th in defensive efficiency to the position over the last 10 games. He has some rebounding upside in the spot. Indiana giving up 12.5 rebounds per game to opposing power forwards over the last 10, to go along with a 46.6% field goal percentage and 39% from three. Pretty strong tournament option in this spot. Might even be cash viable depending on how you want to construct your lineups. Obviously, we know the minutes are going to be pretty solid for him, assuming the game stays close. He's going to take a lot of shots. I have interest in TJ Warren here tonight. You can sprinkle DeAndre Ayton into tournaments. You can look at McCall Bridges as a value option. 53% of his shots are from three, which does give him a boost in this spot. Again, especially with Indiana struggling to defend the three-point line of late. Looking at the Indiana side, obviously Victor Oladipo, who has been absolutely atrocious recently, coming in at 7,800 on DraftKings, 8,300 on FanDuel, has been held below 20 points in 4 straight games. That being said, the price dip on him, especially on DraftKings, really interesting here. Phoenix 27th in defensive efficiency, 2 shooting guards on the season, giving up 24.5 points, 6 assists, 4.6 rebounds, and a 48% field goal percentage, and 42.2% from three. Should absolutely beast in this spot. I really like Victor Oladipo, just way too cheap. And obviously does see a little bit of a boost if Darren Collison misses this game tonight. Darren Collison, Corey Joseph, 2 names to keep an eye on. If Darren Collison misses, Corey Joseph would be a really good value option. Going to be really chalky though, so it might be worth looking elsewhere in tournaments. Phoenix 24th in defensive efficiency to opposing point guards on the season. You can look at Bojan Bogdanovic, Thaddeus Young as strong cash game options. Both guys you know you're most nights going to get mid-20s in fantasy points. That's pretty appealing in the spot. Bojan did have 21 fantasy points in 24 minutes the last time these teams faced off. Miles Turner, Domantas Sabonis, really strong cash and tournament options. I think both of them. Block upside for both of these guys. A lot of rebounding potential in this spot for both. Phoenix ranks 2nd in fantasy points per game allowed. They're giving up 45.7 rebounds per game to opponents. I think Miles Turner is the most interesting option, coming in at 6,500 on DraftKings, 7K on FanDuel because of the block upside. We saw him notch 5 blocks against this team last time they played. I really like Miles Turner in cash and tournaments, assuming he plays. If he sits, you're definitely looking at Domantas Sabonis and even Thaddeus Young as someone to get a little bit of a rebounding boost in this spot here tonight. Moving on, Minnesota at Philly. Philly 6-point favorites in this one, 232 over under. Derrick Rose questionable, but I do expect him to play. Robert Covington is out. Amir Johnson questionable, and Jeff Teague is probable. Looking at the Minnesota side, now that they're almost back to full strength, a little less appealing, but with Robert Covington being out, there's still some minutes and some usage to go around. Karl-Anthony Towns, 29.7% usage rate, 1.58 fantasy points per minute. Whenever you have no Jimmy Butler and no Robert Covington on the floor for the Minnesota Timberwolves, he has been outstanding recently, averaging 27.5 points on 19.6 field goal attempts to go along with 16.6 rebounds and 4 assists over his last 10 games. Has managed to be pretty solid against Joel Embiid in the past, has a couple 50-plus fantasy point games, and we saw, I believe it was the Dallas game that Derrick Rose did return. He still took 21 shots, still had a bunch of blocks and a bunch of rebounds in that game, still managed to put up a solid outing. He's 10-2 on DraftKings. I have more interest in him on DraftKings because of that 10-2 price tag. He's over 11K. Over on FanDuel, that's a little less appealing. I think Derrick Rose, he would likely still play under 30 minutes, but he's definitely interesting. 29.3% usage rate, 1.18 fantasy points per minute. And we have seen Philadelphia really struggle against opposing point guards, especially guys that can score without Robert Covington being there. Jimmy Butler just not as good at getting under those screens as Robert Covington was. I do have interest in Derrick Rose, especially on DraftKings at 5,900, but he's a pretty strong tournament play over on FanDuel at 6,300 as well. You can look at Andrew Wiggins, obviously a risky option because, well, it's Andrew Wiggins. It's still averaging just shy of a fantasy point per minute with a 27.5% usage rate whenever you take Butler and Covington off the floor. He's definitely tournament worthy here. I think Taj Gibson, a very, very strong cash and tournament option at 4,400 across the industry. We know Philadelphia is a team that we like to target with power forwards. They're giving up 21.6 points and 11.8 rebounds per game to opposing power forwards. Jeff Teague, strong cash and tournament option if Derrick Rose doesn't play in this game. He can be used in tournaments if Derrick Rose does play. On the flip side of things, Jimmy Butler revenge spot. Not even taking into account the revenge, I still think this is a really, really good spot here for Jimmy Butler. Hopefully he goes to Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid and, talks to them and he's like, hey guys, let me have this one tonight. But that being said, 7,600 on DraftKings, 8,200 on FanDuel. Really, really strong spot here for Minnesota. 27th in defensive efficiency to opposing small forwards, giving up 23.4 points, 8 rebounds, 4.1 assists, 44.6% shooting from the floor, and 40.3% from beyond the arc. Definitely interesting here, even if you ignore the narrative. Even more interesting if you factor in the narrative tonight. Obviously, Joel Embiid, really, really strong option. Minnesota really struggling to keep opponents off the glass. 45.9 rebounds per game allowed and 14.2 second chance points. I really like JJ Redick, Minnesota, 17th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards, but they're giving up 37% shooting from beyond the arc. JJ Redick taking 53% of his shots from beyond the arc. You can look at Ben Simmons in tournaments if you want. TJ McConnell's still a really, really strong cash option, cash value option here tonight. Looking at the Oklahoma City side of things, or Oklahoma City at Atlanta, this is a very interesting game because we do have more revenge in this one, and that's with Dennis Schroeder, and I'll get to him in just a moment. But Oklahoma City 9-point favorites in this game, 233.5 over under. John Collins and Jeremy Lin are probable. Taurean Prince questionable, but I do expect him to suit up. Alex Abrinas, Kent Bazemore, Miles Plumlee all out, and Dwayne Dedmon doubtful for this game. OKC side is always it's always the same guys. You're always looking at Russell Westbrook and Paul George first. Paul George, really strong option here tonight. Obviously, his ability to fill up the stat sheet, get you 40-plus fantasy points pretty much any given night. He's 9,200 on DraftKings, 9,700 on FanDuel. I have a lot of interest in him here tonight, but obviously you do have to consider Russell Westbrook as well, as Atlanta does rank 29th in defensive efficiency to point guards. They're giving up 25.5 points, 6.8 rebounds, and 9 assists per game to the position. Russell Westbrook is a triple-double threat in the spot. I will say I do think I like Paul George a little bit more. 76% of his shots come in the paint, mid-range, or from beyond the arc. Those are areas where Atlanta has been absolutely pummeled this season. They're giving up 44.5% shooting in the paint, 42.9% shooting in the mid-range, and 36.6% shooting from beyond the arc. Steven Adams, Jeremy Grant, both of these guys really, really strong cash option, have some rebounding upside against an Atlanta team that really can't defend in the interior. They're giving up 14.5 second chance points per game, which is a pretty big boost to Steven Adams, who is one of the best offensive rebounders in the NBA. And when you have Russell Westbrook shooting like 30% from the floor, chucking 15 to 20 shots every night, there's some upside for Steven Adams. Dennis Schroeder, have to talk about him in this spot. Continues to play mid to upper 20s in minutes, continues to take a ton of shots. He's 5,400 on DraftKings, 5,300 on FanDuel. Even if this wasn't a revenge game for Dennis Schroeder and you were just looking at the matchup, it's a really, really strong spot for him here tonight. Obviously, a little bit of a paced-up matchup for Oklahoma City against a bad defense. I like Dennis Schroeder in cash and tournaments here tonight. On the flip side of things, Atlanta not as interesting. There's a couple of guys that'll hit on. Obviously, John Collins continues to be a double-double monster. Notched another one against Milwaukee. Oklahoma City does struggle to defend in the paint a little bit, and they have been beaten up on the boards a little bit of late. John Collins coming in at 7,500 on DraftKings is pretty appealing in tournaments. He's over 8K on FanDuel at 8,400. That's a little less appealing in this spot, but I think in tournaments you can definitely get some exposure. Mostly the places I'm looking are Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Bembry. Both of these guys taking about 20% of their shots in the paint. Oklahoma City has struggled to defend in the paint at times this season. They're giving up 41% shooting in the paint. At their current prices, DeAndre Bembry, 4,500 on DraftKings, 5,400 on FanDuel. Kevin Huerter, 4,800 on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel. They have some upside here at their current prices. I really like Bembry a little bit more, 0.92 fantasy points per minute, 20% usage rate when you take Bazemore and Dedmon off the floor. So he's the guy that I think I'm going to be looking at most. Trae Young, 32.3% usage rate, 1.24 fantasy points per minute, coming off a 10 rebound performance against Milwaukee. Pretty strong tournament option. And then Omari Spellman is a guy that I think is going to garner some ownership. Put up a really big game against Milwaukee, played 29 and a half minutes, 31 fantasy points, 13.6 rebounds. It's worth noting Alex Len, of course, fouled out in that game because, well, it's Alex Len. That being said, Omari Spellman, 3,900 or 3,800 on DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel. I like him on FanDuel as a drop score candidate. DraftKings would be more of just a cash guy if you're expecting the ownership to be really high. I like Alex Len as a tournament pivot off of Omari Spellman in this spot tonight. Moving on to Miami at Milwaukee. Milwaukee 8-point favorites in this one, 219.5 over under. Goran Dragic is out still. Josh Richardson probable, Hassan Whiteside questionable, and Dante DiVincenzo questionable for this game. Miami's side is kind of tough here. Miami has been rolling out an 11-man rotation now that Dion Waiters has returned. That really, really hurts some of these guys in this spot. Makes it really tough to target too many options here. That being said, Justice Winslow is a guy that I do feel pretty confident in his minutes. Has dropped 40-plus fantasy points in back-to-back games. Takes 36% of his shots in the paint or the mid-range areas we like targeting against Milwaukee because they have struggled to defend, but they've also really struggled to defend the three-point line, and we've seen Justice Winslow taking 32% of his shots from beyond the arc this season. He's definitely interesting, 6,500 on DraftKings, 6,800 on FanDuel. Never going to be a guy that projects extremely well, but he does have a lot of upside, especially if he's getting you those assists and rebounds. I like him a significant amount in the spot. I like Josh Richardson. His shot profile as well could punish Milwaukee. Josh Richardson, 6,300 on DraftKings, 6,500 on FanDuel. Another guy you feel really confident in his minutes. You're just not going to see him miss. You're not going to see him be one of the guys that is punished by this 11-man rotation. Outside of Richardson, Dwayne Wade, another guy you know he's going to get his 24, 26 minutes most nights and take a lot of shots when he does it. I like Dwayne Wade as just a value option in this spot. I feel pretty confident that he's going to be able to get me 24 to 26 fantasy points pretty much every single night. I really like Dwayne Wade here. Outside of that, Dion Waiters, Derek Jones, too inconsistent with their minutes. Can't really trust them here, especially Derek Jones. I don't like Derek Jones in matchups where he doesn't, against good rim protection teams. Bam Adebayo has been outplaying Hassan Whiteside. Obviously, Hassan Whiteside questionable for this game in the first place, but Bam Adebayo 5,200 on DraftKings. He is 5,400 on FanDuel. Very, very interesting tournament option. Has been over 30 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. Obviously, someone that I think fits this matchup much better than Hassan Whiteside does. James Johnson, Milwaukee allowing second most fantasy points per game to opposing power forwards. James Johnson, a guy that I like pivoting, using as a pivot off of Omari Spellman. He's 3,900 on DraftKings, 4K on FanDuel. Has been punished a little bit by the 11-man rotation. It's really tough to trust any of these guys, these like the James Johnson, Kelly Olynyk, Dion Waiters, any of those guys. But his length and athleticism, I think, could lend to him getting extra minutes here. Saw 30 minutes against Milwaukee last time these teams faced off. Had a really strong outing against them. I like him a significant amount here tonight. Giannis struggles at times against good rim protection teams. We do need to monitor his status. He's expected to play, but it's more of a pain management situation with his injury. You can use him in tournaments, but I would rather look elsewhere. Malcolm Brogdon, a guy, continues to put up really, really strong outings on a nightly basis, continues to be a really, really good cash game option on a nightly basis. I do like getting some exposure to Malcolm Brogdon. Chris Middleton has topped 30 fantasy points in 8 of the last 10 games. This is a pretty good spot here for him. Obviously, no one against Miami is in a prime spot, but takes 15% of his shots were in the paint, where Miami is allowing opponents to shoot 41% on the season. I like him in cash. I like him in tournaments. He's 6,800 on DraftKings, 7,400 on FanDuel. Just a guy pretty consistent with his scoring of late. Brook Lopez is interesting in tournaments, but outside of that, there's really not a whole lot to like about that game. Moving on to the next game of the night, Golden State at Denver. Golden State just a 1-point favorite in this one, 228 over under. Trey Lyles, Gary Harris questionable for this game. Golden State is averaging 130 points over the last 6 games. It's pretty impressive. A lot to like with the Golden State side of things. Obviously, Kevin Durant is a pretty strong option. We want to target guys, especially right now with Denver's, the way Denver's defense is playing. We want to target guys that can attack the rim, hit shots in the paint, and hit shots from the corners. Unfortunately, the Warriors don't have a lot of players that do that. 23% of Kevin Durant's shots come at the rim, 27% of his shots come in the paint. He's been really consistent, topping 40 fantasy points in 7 of his last 10, has topped 20 points, real points in each of those games. Denver does rank 26th in defensive efficiency to small forwards over the last 10 games. Kevin Durant, 9,700 on DraftKings, 10-3 on FanDuel. I have interest in him. We know the minutes are going to be there in a close game. We know the ability to notch the assist, rebounds, blocks, steals, things like that are there for him. This is a pretty good spot for Kevin Durant. He's my favorite Golden State option here tonight. Draymond Green continues to disappoint everyone, but he does take 42% of his shots at the rim. His ability to stuff the stat sheet does have me interested in tournaments, especially at 6,300 on DraftKings. 7,400, not as appealing over on FanDuel, but this is a spot, obviously, really struggled against Denver last time these teams faced off. On paper, it's not a fantastic spot for him, but again, he's a really, really strong tournament option. He's going to have another one of these eruption games, and we're all going to regret fading him whenever he does. Denver, 4th in defensive efficiency to opposing point guards, but Stephen Curry has been ridiculous recently, averaging 33.4 points, 7 assists, 55.2 rebounds, 44.2% shooting from beyond the arc, and 50% field goal percentage overall over the last 5 games. Stephen Curry, 9,900 on DraftKings, 10K on FanDuel. Really, really strong option in this spot here tonight, especially in tournaments. I do have some interest in him here tonight. Klay Thompson is perfectly fine in cash and in tournaments as well. Outside of that, Outside of that, you can look at Kevon Looney as a cash option just because of the production that we generally get out of him. Although again, the matchup not really great here for Kevon Looney, but he's 4,100 on DraftKings. That's a little bit appealing. He's 4,800 on FanDuel, not as appealing. Did struggle against Dallas, got in some foul trouble, but most nights he's going to get you in the mid 20s in fantasy points. You can look at Jonas Jerebko in tournaments if you want. Denver, mostly healthy here. Most of the options take a pretty big hit. If Gary Harris sits, then we can go back to the Torrey Craig, Malik Beasley, Monte Morris rotation. I would lean towards Malik Beasley and Monte Morris being the better options. That being said, Torrey Craig would be a little bit interesting just given his defensive ability and the fact that they could roll him out a little bit more to try and slow down Stephen Curry or Klay Thompson. But I'm operating under the assumption that Gary Harris is going to play in this game. Golden State ranks 21st in defensive efficiency to centers, allowing 22.3 points, 15.8 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 55% field goal percentage. They've allowed 66.1% shooting at the rim. Nikola Jokic, 41% of his shots come at the rim. Nikola Jokic, a guy I have a lot of interest in here. Triple-double threat, has notched 2 triple-doubles in his last 4 games. Obviously, Will Barton coming back, playing limited minutes does hurt Jokic a little bit. Gary Harris potentially returning does hurt Jokic a little bit. That being said, he's still a monster upside in this spot. I really like him. He's just playing so well, and that's really tough to fade, especially at 10-3 over on DraftKings. If Gary Harris plays and is close to the 28-30 minutes that we were seeing right before he got injured again, he would be a pretty strong cash and tournament option at his current price. 5,400 on DraftKings, 5K on FanDuel. Can pull down some boards. Golden State allowing 5.3 rebounds per game to opposing shooting guards, and they rank 21st in defensive efficiency to the position. Jamal Murray, always just a tournament option just because he's so heavily reliant on his scoring. If we see Will Barton's minutes start to climb, he would be interesting at 5K, 5,100 on FanDuel as a tournament option. But I'm mostly just looking at Jokic. Paul Millsap is fine in cash. Not really a guy that I have a lot of interest in tournaments. The lack of minutes does limit his tournament upside. But yeah, it's mostly Jokic, Gary Harris, the guys that I'm mostly looking at from the Denver side of this game. Moving on to the next game of the night, Chicago at Lakers, the last game that we're going to talk about tonight. I do have a lot of interest in this game, despite the 214 over-under. Lakers 6.5 point favorites in this one. Rondo and LeBron continue to be out. Josh Hart has really been struggling for the Lakers, averaging just 5.7 points on 6 of 21 shooting over the past 3 games. Luke Walton has noticed the team has struggled with shooting and has hinted at a potential lineup change, something that we need to definitely monitor throughout the afternoon. That being said, let's look at the Chicago side of things first. They've been an absolute disaster, averaging just 101.9 points per game over their last 10 games. But a matchup against the Lakers, who play really fast and play really bad defense, definitely interesting in this spot here tonight. It starts with Zach LaVine, who is just, I think especially, actually on both sides, 6,800 on DraftKings and FanDuel, just way too cheap for the matchup and his usage. He's averaged 25.2 points per game over his last 5 games. He hasn't done much of anything else, though, and that's really hurt his fantasy upside. Again, 6,800, though, really appealing. As you can see, he's just not doing anything else. Nothing. A couple of rebounds, an assist, maybe a steal or something, but he's just a raw points. That's all he's really doing. That being said, Lakers 26th in defensive efficiency to shooting guards over the last 10 games, allowing 25.5 points, 6.8 rebounds, 4.6 assists, 43% shooting, and 36.3% shooting from beyond the arc. Lakers are a good rim protection team, and that does hurt Zach LaVine a little bit because, well, Jim Boylan plays 1996 basketball where he wants people to score from the inside out. That hurts him a little bit. But he's someone that I do have a lot of interest in cash and tournaments. 32% usage rate over the last 5 games. You can look at Chris Dunn. Lakers 6th in defensive efficiency to point guards, but with Chris Dunn's value, you're getting the rebounds, you're getting the assists, things like that. He's 6,900 on DraftKings, 7,100 on FanDuel. Again, a lot of his value comes from their peripherals, and so that's something that you do have to be concerned about. More of a tournament option here tonight. Lakers giving up 51 points in the paint per game to go along with 47.2 rebounds per game. As a boost to Lauri Markkanen, who has really struggled of late, but I still have interest in him as well. 6,100 on DraftKings, 6,400 on FanDuel. I'm expecting him to bounce back at one of these games coming up. Still taking a decent amount of shots. I have interest in him. I think Bobby Portis, though, is the guy that I have the most interest in. He's just really cheap. 4,500 on DraftKings, 5K on FanDuel. Definitely has some rebounding upside. He's top 20 fantasy points in each of his 3 games since returning. The only thing that's really stopped him from having, big games is the fact that he's not able to get the minutes that he should be getting because, well, Chicago can't keep games close. His minutes limit's supposed to be like 24 to 26, closer to 28 from the last I saw, but he hasn't been able to play a ton of minutes because, well, the Chicago Bulls suck. But at least the Lakers suck as well, and I think this is a spot where Bobby Portis has a big game. High usage guy, over 30% usage rate off of the bench. Wendell Carter, perfectly fine in tournaments here tonight, especially at his price. On the Lakers side of things, obviously we need to keep an eye on, again, Luke Walton potentially shaking up the starting lineup. I can't imagine that would involve Lonzo Ball, Kyle Kuzma, or Brandon Ingram. If I had to guess, it would be the shooting guard position with Josh Hart and maybe KCP flipping, or center position with Ivica Zubac, maybe. I don't know. We'll have to monitor the news. That being said, Ball, Kuzma, Ingram, guys that I all have a lot of interest in. I have a lot of interest in stacking this game. Kuzma, 31.4% usage rate, 1.12 fantasy points per minute without Rondo and without LeBron on the floor. Bulls ranked 20th in defensive efficiency, 2 power forwards, giving up 21.1 points, 10.6 rebounds, 45.6% shooting. Kyle Kuzma going to be taking like 20 shots every single night. If he hits his shots, he's going to have a monster night. And then against a Bulls team that doesn't play defense, I think he's going to hit those shots. He's a core option for me tonight. Brandon Ingram, 25.9% usage rate, 1.04 fantasy points per minute. Without those guys on the floor, I have a lot of interest in Brandon Ingram as well. It is a really good spot here for him. He is 6,600 on DraftKings, 6,900 on FanDuel. He's actually better whenever you have Kyle Kuzma in the lineup. It's kind of counterintuitive, but I really like Brandon Ingram here tonight. Has been playing pretty well recently. We know the minutes are going to be there for him. Opponents are shooting 41.7% in the paint, 41.6% in the mid-range. 46% of his shots come in those areas. I like Brandon Ingram. I really like Lonzo Ball. Bulls 28th in defensive efficiency, 2 point guards, giving up 25.3 points, 7.6 rebounds, and 8.4 assists. Another guy actually plays a little bit better whenever Kyle Kuzma is in the lineup. Lonzo Ball, 6,700 on DraftKings, 7,100 on FanDuel. Triple-double threat in this spot. Almost got one against Cleveland the other night. Josh Hart, KCP, interesting tournament options. Again, would want to monitor the news. Chicago giving up 40% shooting on corner threes. Both of those guys taking about 20% of their shots from the corners. Chicago getting pummeled by opposing centers, allowing 58.9 fantasy points per game, 29th in defensive efficiency. JaVale McGee, obviously interesting in the spot. Minutes have not really been that good for JaVale McGee. We've seen the Lakers go small several times, but 5,300 for JaVale McGee, interesting on DraftKings. 5,900 for JaVale McGee, interesting on FanDuel, where blocks count for a little bit more. Production has really struggled of late, and that's concerning. Ivica Zubac is a guy to keep an eye on, again, if the lineup change does actually happen. But that does it. That's just 6 games on tonight's slate. Kept this under 30 minutes for you guys. Good luck in all your contests tonight, and I will see you tomorrow.